Welcome to the Harmonious Family Life, how to create deep connections, transform your family, and live with confidence and grace. My name is Bilby, and my mission is to transform families and help them creating a more harmonious family life, where we all can thrive individually and together, using our strengths and unique skills. And today I will be speaking to Bilby. Glenn is a movement expert that creates miracles with his understanding of the body and modern technology. With his background as a sports scientist and physiotherapist, he has a vast knowledge of the body and how to move. He's passionate about helping people to move better and create a better quality of life. Welcome and thank you, Glenn, for joining me today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, we will talk about something that I think that people might not think that they're doing most of the time. Moving is natural for us, and we'll learn how to crawl and walk and run, but we might not always do it well. So today we're going to talk a little bit about moving well and what that means to us. So do you mind tell us a little bit about movement?
Sure. It's a big topic, movement. Everybody needs to move. It doesn't matter what you're doing with your day, just to get out of bed, go and make some breakfast, go down the street, go shopping, go to work, play, enjoy your life, leisure time, recreation. It all involves movement. And it's a fundamental part of what we do every single day. Unfortunately, many people avoid movement because they're in pain, or they avoid movement because they don't think it's fun, or they avoid movement because they have some sort of a disorder, or they have some sort of problem that doesn't allow them to move in a efficient, free, or a flowing way. One of the things we do as physiotherapists is try and help people with movement disorders to move well so that they can function in everyday life. Some people, unfortunately, aren't capable of 100% optimal function because they have a disease or they have an injury. You can be born with movement-related problems. Kids that have cerebral palsy, spina bifida, different types of developmental issues that interferes with the way they move. You can get injuries during your life, too much sitting, maybe not enough movement to start with. People sitting on the sofa watching Netflix and eating chips and going up in weight and forgetting how wonderful it is to experience your body. And then before you know it, you're overweight, you've got painful joints, your heart goes bumping each time you go up and down the stairs, and you learn to dislike exercise and movement. And that's a little bit of a catch-22. And then at the end of your life, you start getting things like osteoporosis if you haven't been putting enough stress on your bones from walking, jumping, lifting, and then your bones become brittle. You lose your ability to balance, so you become afraid of moving. Many people don't want to step out the front door because they're afraid of falling over. And then comes in the old adage, if you don't use it, you will lose it.
Yeah. So it starts from the beginning when we're young to move, and we move just jumping and playing, as you said in the beginning. And so we see a difference nowadays, also the way that kids might not move as often or well as we used to. They sit a lot in front of the computer. And so what do we get to do to help them move and then become better as adults to move well then, so you don't have to have all those things that you just described earlier on?
Sure. So there's an entire movement towards moving more in childhood these days, simply because, as you say, people are more sedentary. Adults are more sedentary, so kids learn to be more sedentary. Kids are easily distracted by mobile phones and iPads. Everything's delivered to them on a screen these days. They get their dopamine kick and their endorphins from the screen instead of playing with children and doing exciting things like climbing trees and jumping puddles and doing somersaults on the trampoline. they get the same level of excitation in their minds. And as far as their minds are concerned and their hormones are concerned, they're having a great time just jumping images like trains, shooting things, solving problems on a screen instead of solving it with their physical bodies.
Mm.
Now, there is an entire, let's say, subdiscipline now around the world called movement literacy. Just like we have literacy for languages and literacy for mathematics, we've now had to introduce something for the first time ever called movement literacy, where we have to teach kids to move. Now, movement is a natural part of human existence. If you look at animals when they're born, they stand up straight away. And if they have siblings, they experiment with their bodies and jumping and hopping on each other and chasing after feathers flying in the wind. Just watch a cat, jumping after a ball of string. It's joyful, and you experience it in your body. You experience it physically, you experience it chemically, you experience it mentally. So movement is really, really important for mental health, really, really important for your metabolic health, and it's really important for social interaction and play. So we're now having to strategically teach children to move at school, to join special groups, not just gymnastics or taekwondo or any of the classic sporting groups, but specific groups that are teaching children to move properly again and explore their bodies. So movement literacy really is about building a vocabulary of fine motor skills and gross motor skills, so that when you transition into older ages, you know how to control your body, and then you take that control, into sporting activities, recreation, work, and more importantly, and this is my world in physiotherapy, preventing disease.
Yeah. So we can then help prevent so that they will fall in the future if we are helping kids to play, and also then maybe risk play as well. Sure. Not just have it, as you mentioned, climbing trees, for example. I know for myself as a mother, you stand there and say, come down, that's too dangerous. But we need to stretch ourselves to do a little bit more risky things as well.
Yeah, sure. And that's another good point. I think through the 70s, 80s and 90s, we started to cotton wool our children and were worried about them scraping their knees. I think we're become a little bit too controlling as parents, and we need to let kids explore their limits, just as we need to teach elderly people to explore their balance limits and not be afraid of falling. I mean, the body it's like a library or an archive that collects experiences over time. And the more experiences you get under your belt, the more flexible you are. So in the case of balance, for example, if you never explore your outer limits of balance before you fall over, you'll never truly know what your capabilities are. So when you're standing on the bus and the bus suddenly stops and you're, rigid as a flagpole and you have no flexibility in your body because you've not taught yourself to balance, under those circumstances, then you'll fall over and then you'll break a hip or break your arm and you'll end up in hospital, unfortunately. And the healthcare system will have to take care of you. And generally speaking, after that, you'll be afraid of falling thereafter. In a way, you can feel more fragile as you get older because you are more fragile and you do have more injuries because of wear and tear, but it shouldn't be any reason for you not to explore your body and movement. So as a child, I think we're preparing kids for older age. I think that's less important than encouraging kids to play and explore their, God-given talent to be able to use their bodies. It's natural for them. And those who have special needs should get more input, not less input, particularly children that need supervision and particularly children that need to be challenged. If you don't challenge the motor control system, it doesn't grow. It doesn't make those connections between the brain and the body. It doesn't make the connections between the neurons, and everything slows down thereafter. Now, movement is very complicated if you look at the mechanisms behind movement. And so when it comes to teaching the body how to become more flexible or have variation in the way it moves, you need to stimulate it from different directions. So you need to run and jump at different speeds in different directions. You need to run and jump while your attention is looking at a ball. You need to teach hand-eye coordination where other objects are involved. You might need to explore being on slippery surfaces. If you live in Scandinavia like I do, you might need to explore how you move in the sand. And then suddenly you've got all these fantastic phenomena that are naturally built into the body. What is the touch under the skin by being barefoot on the grass versus the sand versus even the ice? What sort of sensations do you feel if you're running and jumping in the mud or in a puddle compared to a basketball court? You know, there's all these amazing things that we can experience and invest in ourselves as children as part of play, without any other purpose. No winning, no losing, no scoring, just pure play that prepares us for the rest of our lives. And I think as parents, it's important that we expose our kids to those things, because these days it's not necessarily built into the curriculum at school. If anything, the schools are taking away the sort of, let's call it structured gymnastique, and kids aren't really exploring their bodies in the free way that they used to, at least when I grew up. Everything's being so controlled now. So parents need to take some responsibility for this, and in a way build a culture inside the family that encourages people to play. And I'd say this is even more important for families where the parents are not sporty, they're not athletic for whatever reason. Maybe physically they're not built athletic, or maybe they had a bad experience and then they just reject sport altogether. But it's very important for these parents to deliberately implement something to do with play. Jumping on the trampoline, for example, great exercise for everybody at all ages. Good for grandma and grandpa and osteoporosis. It's low impact, but it's quite demanding. Good for middle-aged adults that are starting to lose their balance, and fantastic for the kids, because quite frankly, the kids are usually better than the adults on a trampoline. And it's one of the few things that they can sort of be at a par with the adults and participate at the same level.
Yeah, it's fun. Right. Definitely, it is. So what would you recommend then, what you can do together? You said jumping on the trampoline, but if you feel that is a little bit too challenging for you, or maybe you don't have access to a trampoline, is there something that you can do as together as a family that is simple? It's movement, but a little bit more, accessible.
Yeah, look, it doesn't have to be too advanced. Anything from walking in the forest together, picking mushrooms, going for a swim in the ocean, fighting against the waves together, holding hand, jumping over waves, building sandcastles, running around with the dog, throwing the frisbee to each other, throwing a ball, kicking a ball, the very basics that sort of constitute the ideal family. You see 2 children and 2 parents in a park doing something together. It doesn't have to be too fancy. And then, of course, you've got all the structured play like athletics for children. You've got more difficult to access things like tennis and golf. They're much more individualistic, but you can still play doubles and you can still be a family walking around the golf course. It's a little bit more difficult to participate as a family when you're playing junior football, because mum and dad are normally too big and the younger brother or sister is too small. But some of those other individual sports or non-competitive sports, it's very, very easy.
Great. Yes. So this is just, I think it's a great thing to just encourage us all to look around us and see what we have around us, and then just maybe put our phone down and go outside, because go outside, we move. So thank you so much for being here, Glenn. Is there any last words that you want to share with the audience about movement or in general?
Sure. There is no ideal posture. There is no ideal movement. It's varied. People are different. We're built differently and we move differently. And that's a good thing. So people should explore variation. However, there is good movement in terms of avoiding injury, and there's good movement in terms of being efficient. And children in particular need to explore a wide variety in order to find their balance point, their optimal. And when they do, they'll move well, they'll move efficiently, they'll move fluidly, and they'll enjoy their bodies. And that will transition into adult life. They will learn to enjoy movement, enjoy their holidays. They'll start to challenge each other for personal growth. They'll have better mental health. Things like stress and burnout will decrease because exercise is fantastic for working against the stresses we experience in life. And then later in life, if you have optimal balance, you have optimal posture, and you have optimal movement patterns, as a grandmother and a grandfather, you can do basically anything. You can step down off a bus without worrying about falling. You can play with your grandchildren without twisting your ankle. You can lead a fulfilling life from when you're born until when you die, but you must keep moving, because if you don't use it, you will lose it.
Well, good ending. Yes. So thank you so much. I think that you have a free gift that you wanted to give to the audience, which is a group coaching session. We will set all the details here on the page. So thank you so much for that. And thank you everyone for watching and listening in. So have a good day.